You've been told that if you're smart with money, build good credit, and stay responsible, you'll achieve financial freedom. But what if that freedom is just an illusion? What if the very tools designed to empower you are quietly engineered to keep you in a lifelong cycle of debt? Today, we'll break down how the credit card, once a symbol of convenience, took control of America, turning a nation of savers into a nation of debtors. But before we start, if you enjoy videos that expose the hidden mechanics of money and power, make sure you subscribe, because we have a lot to uncover together. And tell me in the comments, what's the first thing you ever bought with a credit card? I'm curious to see the different stories we all share. Let's start with a question. Why is it that our grandparents' generation built wealth by avoiding debt, while today, debt is presented as a necessary tool for building a life? The answer isn't about financial literacy or personal discipline. It's about a fundamental shift in our relationship with money, orchestrated over decades. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to the post-war optimism of mid-20th century America. In 1950, a man named Frank McNamara forgot his wallet while dining out. An embarrassing moment that sparked a revolutionary idea? He created a small cardboard card that allowed members to dine at multiple restaurants and settle the bill once a month. He called it the Diners Club. It wasn't about borrowing. It was about convenience. This simple concept was the seed from which a financial empire would grow. Soon after, American Express and other companies followed suit. But the real game changer arrived in 1958 when Bank of America launched the BankAmericard, the first general-purpose credit card. They mass-mailed thousands of active cards to unsuspecting consumers in Fresno, California, in an event that became known as the Fresno Drop. It was a chaotic experiment, but it proved one thing: people would use them. In the prosperous decades following World War II, America was a nation defined by progress, ambition, and a newfound consumer appetite. Credit cards were marketed not as loans, but as symbols of modernity and status. They were the key to the American dream, a passport to a lifestyle of effortless consumption. Advertisements depicted sophisticated men and women using their cards for fine dining, spontaneous travel, and fashionable purchases. The message was clear: with this card, you were part of the elite. You had freedom. The convenience was undeniable, liberating people from the need to carry large amounts of cash. It felt like progress, a step into a frictionless future where desire and acquisition were separated by a simple, satisfying swipe. But beneath this veneer of convenience lay a powerful psychological trap. The buy now, pay later model fundamentally rewired American spending habits. For centuries, the act of purchasing was tangible. You handed over physical cash and felt its absence. This created a natural friction, a moment of pause. Credit cards removed that friction. The pain of payment was delayed, pushed into a vague future, while the pleasure of consumption was immediate. This separation of purchase from payment created a cognitive disconnect, making it easier to overspend without feeling the immediate consequences. Consumers were no longer constrained by the money in their pockets, but by a theoretical credit limit, an abstract number that felt more like a goal than a boundary. This subtle shift was the first step in normalizing a culture of instant gratification, funded by future earnings. It didn't take long for the banks to realize the true gold mine wasn't in the transactions themselves, but in the debt they generated. Initially, the business model relied on charging merchants a small fee for each purchase. But as more people started carrying a balance failing to pay off their full amount each month, the banks discovered the immense profitability of interest. Suddenly, the ideal customer was no longer someone who paid their bill on time. The ideal customer was someone who paid the minimum, remaining in a perpetual state of revolving debt, accruing high-interest charges month after month. The entire industry pivoted. Banks began aggressively marketing higher credit limits and cash advances, encouraging behavior that would lead to indebtedness. Interest rates, often soaring into double digits, became the engine of a multi-billion-dollar industry. The goal was no longer to facilitate purchases, it was to sell debt. Technology and advertising supercharged this new business model, embedding debt into the fabric of daily life. The magnetic stripe, introduced in the 1970s, and later the chip, made transactions faster and more seamless than ever. The internet and e-commerce removed the last physical barriers to spending, allowing for 24/7 consumption from anywhere. Simultaneously, advertising campaigns evolved. They stopped just selling convenience and started selling a narrative that debt was a normal, even necessary part of modern life. They sponsored everything from sporting events to TV shows, making their logos ubiquitous. Phrases like low monthly payments and 0% introductory APR became part of the common lexicon, masking the long-term cost of borrowing. Debt was no longer a sign of financial distress. It was framed as a smart financial tool, essential for everything from booking a flight to building a credit history. To manage this rapidly expanding universe of borrowers, the financial industry needed a new system of control. This led to the creation and popularization of the credit score. What began as a way for lenders to assess risk quickly evolved into something far more powerful, a mathematical judgment on an individual's trustworthiness and, by extension, their social and economic worth. Your entire financial life, every late payment, every new account, every inquiry was distilled into a single 3-digit number. This score determined not just your access to loans, but the interest rates you'd pay, your insurance premiums, and sometimes even your eligibility for a job or an apartment. Personal trust, once built on relationships and reputation within a community, was replaced by an impersonal, algorithmic form of control. You were no longer a person. You were a number, and your life's opportunities were dictated by your ability to please the algorithm. The hidden impact of this system on the American middle class has been profound and devastating. For millions, credit cards became less about choice and more about necessity. As wages stagnated and the cost of living from healthcare to education skyrocketed, credit cards became the bridge to cover the gap between income and expenses. They transformed from a tool for luxury into a lifeline for survival. This created a state of widespread debt dependency, where families were trapped in a cycle of borrowing to pay for essentials, only to be hit with high-interest payments that pushed them further behind. The result is a constant, low-grade financial anxiety that permeates modern life. The fear of an unexpected car repair or medical bill is amplified because, for many, the only safety net is a piece of plastic that comes with a steep price. This massive expansion of consumer credit didn't just affect individual households. It had seismic effects on the entire economy. The flood of easy credit fueled consumption-driven economic booms, creating a fragile prosperity built on borrowing. This contributed to the formation of dangerous economic bubbles. When consumers have access to seemingly limitless credit, demand for assets like housing and stocks can become artificially inflated, leading to booms and subsequent busts, like the 2008 financial crisis, where reckless lending in the mortgage market, a close cousin of credit card debt, brought the global economy to its knees. The system encouraged a growth-at-all-costs mentality, where the short-term profits from lending overshadowed the long-term systemic risks. As the industry's power grew, so did its political influence. Whenever attempts were made to regulate the credit card industry to cap interest rates, limit exorbitant fees, or demand more transparency, a formidable wall of political lobbying stood in the way. Credit card companies and banking associations poured hundreds of millions of dollars into Washington to protect their interests. They argued that regulation would stifle innovation and limit credit access for the very people who needed it most. Lawmakers, heavily influenced by campaign contributions and powerful lobbyists, consistently sided with the industry, passing legislation that protected credit card companies from meaningful oversight. This allowed practices like universal default, where a late payment on one bill could trigger higher rates on all of your cards, to persist for years. The system wasn't just broken, it was protected. So, we are left to reflect. Did the credit card truly empower Americans, granting them financial freedom and convenience? Or did it enslave them under invisible chains of high-interest debt, creating a permanent debtor class that fuels the profits of a few financial giants? The promise was one of access and opportunity. The reality, for many, has been a lifetime of payments for yesterday's purchases, a slow erosion of wealth, and the quiet anxiety of living one emergency away from financial ruin. In a world built on ambition and greed, how credit cards took control of America uncovers a hidden chapter in financial history, a story of power, manipulation, and lessons the world refused to learn. From the corridors of Wall Street to the boardrooms where nations are shaped, this narrative explores the rise, the fall, and the silent consequences that changed how money moves. Every moment builds towards revelation, how decisions made in pursuit of profit reshaped economies, altered lives, and defined the meaning of value itself. As the truth unfolds, one question remains: did we master money, or did money master us?